We'll have to do something about Uncle Ken,
said Granny to the world at large. I was in the kitchen with her, shelling peas and popping a few into my mouth now and then. Susie, the Siamese cat, sat on the sideboard, patiently watching Granny preparing an Irish stew. Susie liked Irish stew.
It's not that I mind him staying,
said Granny.
and I don't want any money from him, either. But it isn't healthy for a young man to remain idle for so long.
Is Uncle Ken a young man, Gran?
He's 40. Everyone says he'll improve as he grows up.
He can go and live with Aunt Mabel.
He does go and lives with Aunt Mabel. He also lives with Aunt Emily and Aunt Beryl. That's his trouble. He has too many doting sisters ready to put him up and put up with him. Their husbands are all quite well off and can afford to have him now and then. So, our Ken spends 3 months with Emily, and 3 months with me. That way, he gets through the year as everyone's guest and doesn't have to worry about making a living.
He's lucky in a way, I said.
His luck won't last forever. Already, Mabel is talking of going to New Zealand. And once India is free in just a year or two from now, Emily and Beryl will probably go to England because their husbands are in the army and all British officers will be leaving.
Can't Uncle Ken follow them to England?
He knows he'll have to start working if he goes there. When your aunts find that they have to manage without servants, they won't be so ready to keep Uncle Ken for long period. In any case, who's going to pay his fare to England or New Zealand?
If he can't go, he'll stay here with you, Granny. You'll be here, won't you?
Not forever, only while I live.
You won't go to England?
No, I've grown up here. I'm like the trees. I've taken root. I won't be going away, not until, like an old tree, I'm without any more leaves. You'll go, though, when you are older. You'll probably finish your schooling in England.
I'd rather finish it here. I want to spend all my holidays with you. If I go to England, who'll look after you when you grow old?
I'm old already, over 60.
Is that very old? It's only a little older than Uncle Ken. And how will you look after him when you're really old?
He can look after himself if he tries. And it's time he must start. It's time he takes a job.
I pondered over the problem. I could think of nothing that would suit Uncle Ken, or rather, I could think of no one who would find him suitable. It was Aya who made a suggestion.
Maharani of Gulshan needs tutor for children.
She said.
Just one boy, one girl.
How do you know?
Asked Granny.
I heard from Children's Ayah. Pay 200 rupees for not much work, only 2 hours every morning.
They were both wrong, Uncle Ken.
Yes, it's a good idea. We'll have to talk him for applying. He ought to go over and see them. The Maharani is a good person to work for.
Uncle Ken agreed to go over and inquire about the job. The Maharani was out when he called, but he was interviewed by the Maharaja.
Do you play tennis?
Asked the Maharaja.
Yes,
Said Uncle Ken, who remembered having played a bit of tennis when he was a schoolboy.
In that case, the job's yours. I've been looking for a fourth player for a doubles match. By the way, were you at Cambridge?
I said.
No, I was at Oxford.
Said Uncle Ken. The Maharaja was impressed. An Oxford man who could play tennis was just the sort of tutor he wanted for his children. When Uncle Ken told Granny about the interview, she said,
but you haven't been to Oxford, Ken. How could you say that?
Of course I've been to Oxford. Don't you remember, I spent 2 years there with your brother Jim.
Yes, but you were helping him in his pub in the town. You weren't at the university.
Well, The Maharaja never asked me if I'd been to the university. He asked me if I was at Cambridge, and I said no, I was at Oxford, which was perfectly true. He didn't ask me what I was doing at Oxford. What difference does it make?
And he strolled off, whistling. To our surprise, Uncle Ken was a great success at his job, in the beginning, anyway. The Maharaja was such a poor tennis player that he was delighted to discover that there was someone who was even worse. So, instead of becoming a doubles partner for the Maharaja, Uncle Ken became his favorite singles opponent. As long as he could keep losing to the Maharaja, Uncle Ken's job was safe. In between tennis matches and accompanying his employer on duck shoots, Uncle Ken squeezed in a few lessons for the children, teaching them reading, writing and arithmetic. Sometimes he took me along, so that I could tell him when he got his sums wrong. Uncle Ken wasn't very good in subtraction. The Maharaja's children were smaller than me. Uncle Ken would leave me with them, saying,
Just see that they do their sums properly, Rusty.
And he would stroll off to the tennis courts, hands in his pockets, whistling tunelessly. Even if his pupils had different answers to the same sum, he would give both of them an encouraging pat, saying,
Excellent, excellent. I'm glad to see both of you trying so hard. One of you is right and one of you is wrong, but I don't want to discourage either of you, so I won't say who's right and who's wrong.
But afterwards, on the way home, he'd ask me,
Which was the right answer, Rusty?
They were both wrong, Uncle Ken.
Uncle Ken always maintained that he would have never lost his job if he hadn't beaten the Maharaja at tennis. Not that Uncle Ken had any intention of winning. But by playing occasional games with the Maharaja's secretaries and guests, his tennis had improved. So, trying as hard as he could to lose, he couldn't help winning a match against his employer. The Maharaja was furious.
Mr. Bond,
He said sternly,
I don't think you realize the importance of losing. We can't all win, you know. Where would the world be without losers?
I'm terribly sorry.
said Uncle Ken.
It was just a fluke, Your Highness.
The Maharaja accepted Uncle Ken's apologies, but about a week later, it happened again. Uncle Ken won and the Maharaja stormed off the court without saying a word. The following day, he turned up at lesson time. As usual, Uncle Ken and the children were engaged in a game of noughts and crosses.
We won't be requiring your service from tomorrow, Mr. Bond. I've asked my secretary to give you a month's salary in lieu of notice.
Uncle Ken came home with his hands in his pockets, whistling cheerfully.
You are early.
They don't need me anymore.
Oh well, never mind. Come in and have your tea.
Granny must have known the job wouldn't last very long. And she wasn't one to nag. As she said later,
At least he tried. And it lasted longer than most of his jobs, 2 months.